Okay, so continuing the conversation with Jose Gonzalez about slow training, the two case studies. Because I asked him, he said he knows two people that did this, and he's seen it happen, and this is what prompted me to ask him to ask this question of me, see what I had to say on the topic. So I wrote him back. I said, well, you're in the same region I grew up in. Who are these guys? I said, I might know them. And it turns out I know one of them. So let's talk about these two individuals. One individual was, he said his first name was Carlos, and he was a Taekwondo practitioner, and he had a, standard beginning in Taekwondo, but at a relatively early age developed arthritic problems. And so he would only train slow. He wouldn't train full speed, full power, and I don't know if that means that he trained really slow, like Tai Chi slow, or just relatively slow. But I know if you have arthritis, you don't feel like, he said he would even hit bags and things, but slow, to spare his joints. And he got in an altercation, and it was in the newspaper, so it was verified by outside sources. And he was attacked by several people, and he knocked them out. Right? So let's take a look at that. Let's deconstruct that. This person had a standard beginning in the martial arts. So he had learned how to execute full power, full speed movements. If he's doing Taekwondo, he can definitely kick and punch in the air. And they like to hit pads in Taekwondo. They like to hit the kidney bag and the paddle bags and, maybe the bag and shield. So he's definitely kicked and some punches against resistance, full speed and full power. But his body began to break down. It could be genetics. It could be any number of things. He could have had a really sort of physical labor job that was beating him down. And so to maintain himself, he trained slow. So again, we talked about threshold and gateway experiences where there are certain things, once you do them, you don't have to spend a lot of time relearning them. They're sort of there. Okay, so once you've learned how to move and hit targets, be accurate, follow through with your power, it doesn't require that as much maintenance as, say, the ability to leap in the air and do 2 kicks in midair. That just requires a lot of maintenance. You have to maintain your weight. You have to, keep up on jumping. If you don't jump for a month and then start jumping again, you'll see a difference. So that's one thing. And then the other case, this is where it gets interesting. And if you're listening, Larry, I like you, I respect you. So if I'm saying anything that's none of this is meant to be denigrating, okay? It's been a while since we met. Larry Whitaker, when I met him, was a second-degree black belt in USA Goju under Sensei Michael Hurley. Michael Hurley is one tough SOB. He was a 5th-degree black belt in USA Goju. He had trained directly under Peter Urban, but before that he had trained overseas with Gogen Yamaguchi. And he even told me, when he came, he was a CB in the Navy, and he had served in Vietnam. He was a big, burly guy, big shoulders, male pattern baldness. Everything about him was just big and blocky and strong. I remember he would grab my wrist, practicing a wrist defense, and the blood just went out of my hand. Like it began to tingle from the circulation being cut off that hard. And he was a carpenter, so he's just physically strong. He said when he got back from the Navy, he moved back to Trenton. He trained briefly with Sensei Katsuya Kisaka, Master Kisaka, Shotokan Karate, my first instructor. And when he told him he trained with Yamaguchi, he said Kisaka personally beat him up in sparring. Like I'm not talking scored points on him. I mean beat him up, because he could get old school Japanese really fast. Okay. So Michael Hurley was a stern, tough taskmaster, a tough guy. So Larry Whitaker trained under a really tough guy, and Sensei Hurley, you do lots of basics, repetition. You do kata, you do sparring. He loves the Makawara. He loves hitting the equipment. And Jose says, he'd never, ever seen Larry move fast. And I can concur. I never saw him actually move fast. I never saw him train full speed or even what I would consider fast. He wasn't Tai Chi slow though. He would do a move. So for example, that's a full speed punch, right? But he'd be more like boom, 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 boom. There was some movement. There was some snap. There was some body behind what he did. Or he might go, But see how I'm not moving fast at all? So I know he worked briefly for one of my old teachers, Sensei Jeff Mack. Jeff actually hired him to teach. And then he was no longer working for Jeff Mack. There might have been a fallout. I don't know. I know that probably started training with Michael Hurley again, because when I met him, he was Sensei Michael Hurley had a dojo, and Larry Whitaker was teaching majority of the classes. And he was a happy-go-lucky guy. The man likes his cannabis. He likes to have a drink now and then. He likes to party. Nothing wrong with that. The guy works for a living. I think he did carpentry too. How would I describe him? If you would combine Huey Lewis and Omar Sharif, that's kind of like the look you get. He was average, about average height, maybe a little bit above average. He looked like he could have acted in a movie, right? So, and Larry trains regularly with the Makawara. So apparently, now this was a long time ago that I met him. He might have moved up the ranks, moved up to 3rd, 4th degree, whatever, in the USA Goju system. I'd sparred with Larry. Larry was never very quick, but if he hit you, he could hurt you. He could deliver with a punch, especially, right? So apparently, Jose said, there's quite a few bars in the Trenton region, and I think he said Larry was bartending. And he loved to talk about his training and how he was a black belt, and he trained under Sensei Michael Hurley and all that. And so apparently some of the local, drunks, 2 guys, decided to test him out. Kind of silly, but so Jose wasn't there, but there were eyewitnesses there. And based on what I know of Larry, he said that he fought them. He got the harder of the punches, stayed upright, and when the fight was over, he was still standing, and those other guys weren't necessarily knocked out, but he got the better of them. And this is a guy that, doesn't train quick, doesn't train speed. Now, this is what I'm going to say. I don't know if Larry can move fast. I don't know. He might be one of those people that's just not very fast twitch, or he might have had what you call some type of joint condition or something like that. Because I know he was into carpentry, and that stuff's rough physical labor. Also, Larry likes to smoke his cannabis, and he's always smiling. He's cool, funny guy to be around, but that may be a factor in it. It may just be that he just can't really move that fast. But again, when you're in adrenal state, when you're in that stress state, you can move faster than your normal state. You can hit just a little bit harder. You can lift just a little bit more. You'll feel it the next day. If you don't tear or break something, you'll definitely be sore and you'll be less mobile the next day. So in both cases, we're talking about people that started in what's called hard style, right? And they had the traditional training that involved move as fast as you can, hit these targets, sparring. And the USA Goju people and the Taekwondo people in Hamilton, even if they're going to point tournaments, they don't train point in class, which is interesting. It's why a lot of them don't do well in point tournaments. Is if you train to what the conditions you're supposed to win in, right? If you're going to win a point tournament, you need to have mini point tournaments in class. But we would do continuous sparring, and we would do light contact continuous, right? So we're talking about people that knew how to hit hard, that at least had people coming at them fast and hard when they were sparring, and that went through a period where they were sparring regularly, hitting targets regularly. Both of them maintained their bodies, their flexibility. Larry wasn't super flexible, but he was flexible enough. and who under conditions of adrenal stress and actual resistance were able to perform. Okay, perform fast and strong. I don't know how they felt the next day. In the first instance, it was a very serious fight. In that he was accosted, on the street. It happened out in public. That's why it was in the local papers, right? And that's a street assault. That's pretty serious. You don't know what their intent was. Was it based on robbing someone? Was it based on a personal beef? Was it based on a racial incident? We don't know. We know with Larry, according to eyewitnesses, that this was sort of male ritual combat taken to an extreme degree, where two people wanted to challenge one person because maybe they felt their masculinity was diminished, or they felt that person's lying, and they've appointed themselves guardians of the truth. Right? I'm going to say another thing. I don't know who the other gentleman trained under, but I know that Larry trained under a very harsh sensei. Okay? This man, Sensei Hurley was a harsh teacher, physically. Like, you did not want to get hit by the guy. And he was very extreme. He was very life and death about certain things. I know this, for example, my old instructor, one of my old instructors in Hamilton, Jeff Mack, who's retired from teaching, he had a logo on his door that said USA Goju, because at one point he trained with Phil Holder, who at one point was a USA Goju guy. And it's the Goju fist and the Goju logo, but above it is USA Goju. That's Peter Urban's lineage. And it would have been a right fist, okay? And it was on his door. It was like a sticker. Well, apparently at one point, Sensei Hurley found out about that and got really aggravated, went to the studio and said, who is that putting a USA Goju logo? You are not a USA Goju black belt, and this is not a USA Goju school. Who authorized you to do that? And challenged him to a death match. Now, Jeff, to his credit, no matter what he'll say, realized that he was staring at death. He was staring at someone that was willing to beat him to death over the use of that logo. But Jeff was also charismatic in a Weasley sort of way. And Jeff is the kind of guy, he could steal your underwear from you and sell it back to you at a profit. So by the time he was finished talking, Sensei Hurley's like, fine, all you've got to do is take a black magic marker and blot out the USA Goju logo. And, or maybe even just the USA. It's been a while since I saw it. And keep that on your front door. So, yeah. Larry trained under a really harsh sensei. And I'm pretty sure that he was tested in class. Not just tested for proficiency, but tested as to how much of a beating he could give and take, and how cool he could stay under that physical pressure. So it doesn't surprise me that regardless of what happened, Larry survived that incident, was able to use his USA Goju training, not necessarily because that style is any superior to any other style, or Taekwondo or Muay Thai is superior to this, but that his level of preparation, his ability to execute, was superior to the threat level, the escalation level that he encountered on that day. And he had maintained that and gained that without a lot of fast twitch work, without a lot of explosive work, pretty much without speed work for most of his career. So those are real life anecdotes. I'm hoping that if you're an older person and you're wondering, how to maintain your training as the years go by, that this is helpful. Other than that, you'll have a nice day.